want you just to look at a verse as we set the stage for this next song that we're going to sing. And we'll be talking a little bit about respect, but I want you just to notice this verse. And even before you look at this verse, I want to just remind you of a reality, of a truth. In Genesis chapter 3, for the first time, we have the first family, Adam and Eve, there in the garden. Everything's wonderful. Then the enemy comes along, and the enemy tells the first lie recorded in Scripture, the first lie in all history, as he speaks to Adam and Eve, and he does something very important. It's profound. Anytime you have a first in the Bible, you need to recognize that it's setting the tone for the rest of Scripture. Satan says to Adam and Eve, as they're in this discussion concerning whether they should eat off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which God, of course, said no. Don't eat of this tree. Satan comes along and entices mankind in Adam and Eve. But he says something very profound. He says these words, "You will not surely die." You will not die. What God said is not true. There are no consequences for your actions. That's what the enemy was saying. He continues to say it 6,000 years later to every one of us seated in the sanctuary this morning. There are no consequences for your actions. One of the things we see today is that there is no fear of God before the eyes of people. We'll do what we want and forget you, God, or we'll dismiss the Bible, we'll dismiss any rules or regulations that we don't like concerning Scripture. Now, we can talk about, and we will in further discussions concerning the family and the Bible, we'll talk about some things that have to do with this idea of the Scripture and what it indeed says for us. But I want you just to think about Satan's first ploy, his first line, because it's his last line, and it's his eternal line. There are no consequences for actions. Do we not believe that? Do we not see that in our society today? We've taken away the consequences for just about everything that you can imagine. We dismiss it. We find a way to excuse it. We find a way to rationalize it. Nowhere is that more critical than we're talking about spiritual truths. When we sometimes so blithely want to dismiss Jesus' talking about hell or about the eternal judgment or things that we don't want to talk about and think about, and so we just kind of dismiss those. And yet the Bible does it and God does it. We're just listening to what the enemy says. We're talking this morning about respect or about fear. And you see the verse there in Proverbs 1:7. It's a verse that will be repeated again in just a little bit. But the fear of the Lord, and the word for fear there, yar in the Hebrew, it simply means to reverence, to respect, to have a piety for. It's not just that we're phobos, afraid, we have a phobia of God, but that we have a genuine, deep respect of God for who He is, but also for what He can do. The fear of the Lord is, notice the next word, the beginning of wisdom. It's not the end. It's not something you can pick up later. It is the beginning of wisdom. This morning we're going to sing one last song. It's a song that Michael W. Smith wrote many, many years ago. We've sung it here for literally decades. It's a song called Awesome God. And I want you to look at the words of Awesome God, because I think it says something that we need to be reminded of in this day and this time here in our society. We think that somehow God's going to turn a blind eye to the breaking of His rules. And it's not, again, that God is just looking to punish us. It is simply that laws are laws, and they work regardless of whether we believe in them or not. I can say to every one of you, I do not believe in the law of gravity. But the truth is, it doesn't matter what I believe, the laws work. The laws are true. And as this song talks about, when He rolls up the sleeve, and again, it was written 25 plus years ago, but think of these words. When He rolls up the sleeve, He's not just putting on the Ritz, which is a term of He's not just showing off. There's thunder in His footsteps. I would ask you this morning, are you afraid of God? Do you have a healthy, holy, genuine fear of God? I don't see that much in the world today. I don't see that in the attitudes of what's portrayed through Hollywood and the media and television and on with those things. But that's them. I'm talking about us. Do we here this morning, do we have a healthy understanding and fear? There's thunder in His footsteps. There's lightning in his fist. The next part says, and the Lord wasn't joking. He wasn't just fooling around. He wasn't just kidding. It wasn't something incidentally that he did as a happenstance. He wasn't joking when he kicked them out of Eden. It wasn't for no reason that he shed his blood. When we say there are no consequences, we not only diminish the power of the cross, we dismiss it. Because we say it really didn't matter. He didn't have to come and die because there is no hell. There are no consequences. There is no judgment. Therefore, Jesus died in vain. What a waste. I mean, that's literally what we're saying when we don't understand the holy, healthy fear. It wasn't for no reason that he shed his blood. His return is very close. So we better be believing that our God is an awesome God. And when the sky was starless in the void of the night, he spoke into the darkness. There's a lot of darkness in this world today, but he can speak into that darkness in everybody's heart in this sanctuary. He can speak to the darkness in Hollywood and New York and Washington, D.C. and create the light. He can do that. You believe that? And so we got to keep believing because our God is an awesome God. He's a God to be understood, to be esteemed, to be recognized, to be feared. You're going to stand before him someday. The final verse there, judgment and wrath that he poured out on Sodom. Ooh, I wonder if he saw the Grammys. Judgment and wrath that he poured out on Sodom. The mercy and the grace that he gave us at the cross. I hope you, me, have not too quickly forgotten. Our God is a fearful, awesome, holy, judging, loving, merciful, but law-abiding God. And this morning, let's sing to him about that to set up the stage of what we're going to do for the rest of the morning. You can sit, you can stand, whatever, but Sean, the team's going to lead us in this wonderful song, Our God is an Awesome God. Sing it, please.
When he rose up the seas, he ain't just putting on the ritz.
Our God is an awesome God.
There's thunder in his footsteps and lightning in his fist.
Our God is an awesome God.
And the Lord, he wasn't joking when he kicked him out of Eden. It wasn't for no reason that he shed his blood. His return is very close, and so you better be believing that
Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
our God
Is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
And when the sky was starless in the void of the night,
Our God is an awesome God.
he spoke into the darkness and created all the light.
Our God is an awesome God.
Judgment and wrath he poured out on Sodom. Mercy and grace he gave us at the cross. I hope that we have not too quickly forgotten that our God is an awesome God.
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Our
God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
time. Our God is an awesome God.
He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. Man.
Thank you, team. Well, Greg's already said it, but I do truly want to welcome everybody. Sean, would you help me move those over there? This morning, we're going to get right to the most important part. I'm going to be inviting some guests up to the table here in just a few moments. I want to make mention of a couple of things. First of all, I do want to welcome you if you're visiting with us, and we're glad you're here. We've been talking about a series on the family. I really believe that the only thing that's going to save America is families, strong, healthy families. Last week, Greg talked about, and Whitney Smith and the Tyndall family were here and talked about some things. Before that, Bob spoke and talked about accidental intentionality. And so we've been focusing in on the importance of the family. A church is only as strong as the families. A country is only as strong as families. So, and a family, in fact, impacts all of us. So we want to just touch on a few things concerning families this morning, and we'll be very specific as we talk about respect. I want to just draw your attention to a couple of resources that are at the back. First of all, we'll ask you some questions, and I want you just to think about this for your own personal situation. What would your friends think if you called them up and said, hey, me and the kids are going to be over in 15 minutes to your house? Would they say, okay, or, oh, Lord? Based on your current trajectory, Bob mentioned and talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago about the trajectory as we are here now, but when we play that out 3, 5, 10, and 15 years, it really makes a difference, the direction that we're going, and the little things add up. So based on your current trajectory, what will your child or your family look like in 10 years? That's not a bad thing. We're not saying it's just, what's your makeup going to be? My trajectory has changed, Pam and I, and ours, because just time does that. So you need to be thinking about where your kids are at, where you're at if you're a parent. If you're not a parent, where you're going to be in 10 years, and what will your family makeup be? Will you be happy if your children treat their spouse the way you treat yours? Okay, it's quiet. Are you comfortable with the thought that your children will be raising your grandchildren? Got to think about that. And lastly, here, this is the bottom line. This is the takeaway for everything we're talking about this morning. Do your children respect you? And I'm talking about that fearful respect, that honor, that reverence, that piety that the Bible says is the beginning of the wisdom. And there's the verse again. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. If we don't have a healthy fear, an understanding and a healthy fear in our lives of the things that are important, we will never attain wisdom and instruction. We will never become wise. We will always struggle. We will have, ultimately, the Bible says we'll end up with a depraved mind in some ways in society. Perhaps we're close to that. But regardless, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So I want you to think about those terms. As I said, I had a couple of, there's a sheet at the back, and it looks like this. And it's actually, and I'll show it in a little more fullness here in just a second. This is a theory. I've been privileged to teach for about 15 years. I teach psychology and child psychology for Rend Lake College. And I've been doing youth group for 40 years. And that's still the most wonderful learning tool of all, is working with youth. Because they're honest. They haven't learned how to cover up things. And there's just that interaction. It keeps you on your feet. It keeps you thinking. Life is changing. I just did the high school class just a little while ago as we talked about some things. And from that, and I'm not saying I'm wise or anything like that, but I've just developed a theory. And this is my theory of child development. My name's on it. It's in every book. And it's not in any books. But I believe it to be true. And what you're seeing on the screen is a couple of comments that I make concerning 3 statements on this biblical-based principles for developing positive behavior, character, and maturity in children. I have some copies back there on the resource table. You're welcome to those. I'll send that to you. I believe in this. We have practiced this. I think it to be true. I wouldn't be sharing with you if I didn't. Number 1 statement is that respect is the foundation for pro-social or positive behavior. Apart from that, you will never get pro-social or positive behavior without the basis of respect. That's Proverbs 1:7, but that's also just common sense. Proverbs 1:7, again, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The second statement there, vertical relationships, how to relate to authority, are much more important than horizontal relationships. I see a lot of families today that are very concerned about their child being socialized, and so we put them in daycare and early childhood and things like that. I don't have any problem with those programs, but if all you're getting is social relationships, every kid will find a group to associate with. We've got teachers, we've got superintendents, we've got principals, we've got people in this room who have worked in all kinds of areas of education. I can assure you that every child in every high school that's represented in this sanctuary has found a group to hang out with. It may not be the group you wanted them to hang out with, but there's always socialization. They will find a place. That's never the issue. The issue is how do they relate vertically to authority. So that's the more important issue. And the third thing there, and I think the bottom line, is the development of godly behaviors, character, and maturity. And by the way, all truth is God's truth. If it's good, it's of God. So the development of godly behaviors, character, and maturity in any individual, and this is the word, is sequential. In other words, you can't bypass respect and ever expect to have maturity in any human being. The fear of the Lord, the understanding, the reverence of the authorities that God has placed in our life is the bottom line, the most important issue that we face today. And by the way, we don't have much of it. I think one of the most atrocious, I'm not running for any office right now, but one of the most atrocious laws that ever took place in the state of Illinois is when we took this out of public schools. We took the fear of God from the eyes of children, and now they can talk us to death, and they are. Because we have no way to institute any fear. And lastly on this, and then I'm going to invite the guest up, this is also from the sheet, the Bible-based principles for developing maturity and character in children. There's a sequentialness, and you see the bottom box there. We may talk about that a little more. We may not get into it. I'm not going to belabor the point. But you'll notice that it says on that red or brown box, physical punishment. How many of you have dogs? Have you been able to talk to your dog and tell him to stay home? I just wondered. I mean, some of you, I know you talk to your dogs. I've watched you. Some of you even look like your pets. You can't. There's an understanding, a basic understanding. A lot of you spend money. You buy these things and these little electrified ropes, and you put them under the ground around your house. And you put a collar on that dog's neck. And then when that dog runs past or near that collar, what happens? It's shocked. That's called training. There will never be learning until there is training. And training always requires some form of adverse pleasure. Let me say that again. It might be physical punishment. It might be some other aspects, removal of approval, things like that. But until you train, and we're talking children, but we're not just talking children, until you train someone in the consequences of their actions, I put on this, physical pain is the most basic human understanding. The painful and inevitable result of wrong or harmful actions. Training must take place before learning. Parents, if we try to teach our children before we have trained them, I'm going to say to you, you're going to fail. There has to be an understanding at a most basic level that this isn't good for you. It may be touching the stove or whatever the hot object, and that registers with their pain sensors. And in their brain, there's that understanding. You don't have to convince them of it. They are convinced by simply the adverse situation, the painful situation that they experience, that they're not going to do that again. The Bible gives us a verse, many verses actually, but Proverbs 13, whoever spares the rod hates his children. Now, I'm not here to just necessarily promote spanking or physical pain. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about respect. We'll never have the families we need to have until we are able to engender or create respect in those families. I've given you my theory. It's out there. You can look at it. You can criticize it. You may do what you want. Also on that table are 25 activities or ideas on how to grow children. These are fun things. These are things that build responsibility into children. It builds character development. For example, trips and events for one. Treasure hunts, the joy of learning and exploring. It never goes away. Subscribe to a magazine in the child's name and let them go to the mailbox and get it. Quit ordering for your children at McDonald's or at Martin's. Let them figure out how to do things on their own. Love on your spouse if you're privileged enough to be married, and let them watch, and that modeling idea. Jesus did a lot of modeling when he was here on earth. So anyway, some wonderful things here. Give money away secretly to a needy family. Justin and Misty Wyatt were up here 2 weeks ago, and they talked about at Christmas how they were giving away her wonderful cupcakes to deserving people, and I didn't get any. But that wonderful thing of teaching them the joy of giving things away and what that does to your heart. That's maturity. So those are some things. I want to invite some guests up right now. And those guests are 4 of my children. That would be Mr. Brian Miner, Miss Emily Skibo, and Miss Erin McCommons, and Miss Elizabeth Roberts. So would you 4 just make your way on up here, please? While they're coming up, I'm just going to tell you, here's the 2 things. This is unrehearsed. These are the 2 questions. They knew about the 2 questions. I'm going to step out in front, guys. Just take any seat you want. And there's a couple of microphones. We'll just lay them on the table for you. So this is a discussion. This is, and I'm not here to just have the children up front necessarily, because they're hating this, I can tell you right now. But they were a convenient group. Now, I do want to apologize. I know a couple of weeks ago, there was pizza that was delivered, and, Bob Pankey was able to pull that off, but it does have coffee. But I was not able to pull off any kind of, food for you, so...
Care of you. We all know who her favorite is. She brought my favorite. Can't eat that.
Mommy to the rescue. There is coffee, so you can pour yourself a little coffee if you like. But we want to just talk about these 2 questions, and I gave them the questions in advance just to consider. Again, the issue of the purpose of this discussion is the idea of building respect. And the Bible says, the verse that we just read, and we could read many other verses, is that fear of the Lord is the beginning. It's the basis. It's the foundation for the things that we want to grow into healthy children, and not just children, into we can do it not as parents, but even as grandparents, even as coaches or employers. So I've just tossed these 2 questions out there for them. Here's where it gets a little scary because we don't have any script. I don't know if they're going to talk. I don't know what they're going to say. And I don't really care because, honestly, I trust them. And that's one of the things that I think as parents, if you're privileged to do it God's way. I said this a few weeks ago when I was preaching. Hillary was wrong when somebody ghost wrote her book for her. When she said, it takes a village, it takes a church. It takes a church. Now, if this is a village, then she's correct. But it takes a church. And I am so thankful to God for the people who come alongside when mom and dad were idiots and didn't know anything. That there were people, you all out here, that came alongside when our children were younger, and you spoke the same thing we spoke, but because of the difference in relationship, you were listened to. And I'm thankful that you were willing to put yourself and insert yourself into our lives. And I want to ask you to continue to do that, not only in our lives, but in the lives of the people around you, in love, in wisdom, and with the goal of seeing mature young men and women come out of this church and out of our families. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I trust them, And the first question is, or discussion point actually, talk about the role of discipline. One last little story. I do believe in spanking. I believe that it is necessary. It doesn't have to be overdone. If spanking doesn't work, there's a muscle right here called the trapezius that'll put a child on the ground pretty quickly. Whatever it takes, you've got to be in control if you're a parent. If you're not a parent. It requires control. That's why God created the family, no matter how the world wants to try to redefine it. The purpose of the family was to raise up godly offspring. God told us to do two things in the Garden of Eden. He told us to eat and He told us to multiply. Those are the two requirements God gave to humanity, mandates that God gave to humanity. The reason for the family was to multiply and create godly offspring. We had a paddle. It was orange and it was used and it hung in our house. It's gone away. We don't know where it is. Brian said he burned it in the wood burner when he was in 6th grade. My response to him was, hence the reason that Elizabeth was the way she was. Okay. So that's up there for that. Y'all can eat. There is coffee there. It's just a discussion. The microphones are before you. Anybody want to speak to the first question there? Because all of them are parents now. They represent 7, 9? 2, 4, 6. They represent 9 children up here. So privilege for that. Go ahead and anybody want to just jump right in because we're going to take about 10 minutes, 15 minutes at most to talk and let you discuss. Okay.
I'll start. I think maybe consistency and predictability. I know when we were growing up, we pretty much knew if they said whatever was going to happen, it was going to happen. And you kind of knew even before you did whatever was wrong that, that was the consequences were coming. And so I think that like consistency just every time, knowing that it was just always going to happen the same way, kind of you build respect because you know that you should fear that person in some ways and that, eventually you learn that they're saying that for a certain reason, for your safety. But at first it was just because you knew that's what they said and they were going to do spankings or whatever was going to happen, that it was going to happen.
I don't know that we ever said because I said so. Did we? I mean, we may have. But I don't think it's a bad thing to say. I mean, if you're the parent and because you said so. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I'm trying. I think every day is a new day for any parent, as to how to be the best parent that you can be. And along with what Emily has said, mom and dad are always very consistent, and I've tried to bring that into my parenting. Even when you don't want to get up and discipline them or whatever, stop what you're doing to, it's very important that you do. But just like the Toby Keith song, a little less talk and a lot more action. And I have a tendency of yelling. I think that's what he meant by that song, actually, was disciplining. I'm sure of it.
Here's the baby.
Hold on.
Where's Nathan?
Where is Nathan? Nathan's in St. Louis. By the way,
I had a point by that.
go ahead.
Well, I could yell at them all day, but until I get the fire underneath their tail to do it, whether I have a wooden spoon at home because we don't have a wooden paddle. But sometimes I just have to bring that out and we do business. So that's kind of my role of discipline is I feel like consistency and take action instead of just yelling and yelling. I don't ever count to 5 or 10 or 100 like Dad's always said. You can count to 1,000,000 and they're going to wait until you're on the last number, then they'll hurry up and do it. And I may give a warning and then maybe you better be doing it. And then I'm hopefully should be taking action by then.
I don't know, they've already kind of said what I was going to say, but just what Emily said, the consistency of, you knew
what they said they were going to do. If you choose to proceed with whatever it is you wanted to do, then you were going to reap what you sow there. But one of the things, like, I always try to do with my kids is, Mom and Dad were neither one big yellers. In fact, probably the quieter they were, the more serious you knew they were, because this little, you better not do that again. That silent, that lower voice in your face kind of thing, like you knew really that business. But yeah, and then definitely the orange wooden paddle. When they got that out, you knew you better stop. You better whip yourself in shape.
And you're all parents right now, so I mean, it's not just about your upbringing, because certainly there were lots of mistakes, and we know that. But what are you seeing right now in the sense of disciplining your children? I mean, children, Brian, your kids are different than Elizabeth's, than Emily's and Aaron's, and every child's unique, so it requires, parenting is an art, folks. We've got to understand that. God gave you that child. He loaned him or her to you for a while, actually. But it's an art to do the right thing. And what worked for one child will not work for another. Would everybody agree with that? Those of you that are parents, grandparents. So, have you learned anything specific or unique that has popped up for you as far as your situations in your own parenting?
This doesn't really go along with it, but one thing too I want to say is, we've been talking about the whole spanking and that kind of stuff, but as we got older and, spanking wasn't really, not that it couldn't be done, but didn't, it wasn't as much anymore. One thing that Mom and Dad always said, especially when we were more like, junior high, high school, is that you have our trust until you lose it, and that was always like, that echo in your mind, do I want to lose their trust? Is this worth losing their trust over? So as we got older, that was definitely something that, it was kind of that voice in your head.
We use today, April and I, we try to be real intentional, and because I know that's how I was raised. Discipline is, the role of discipline was to establish the boundaries, and as the parents, we set the boundaries, and our kids, they pretty well know the boundaries, and they know they can operate within those boundaries. But if they cross the boundary, there will be something, and I think it depends on each boundary has its own repercussion. But I think that is the role of I don't know if I'm saying this right, but that's how we use the role of discipline in our house anyway. It's just a set of boundaries. When you cross the boundary, you without a doubt you're going to pay something. It's going to cost you something. It might be a SWAT. It might be, no TV or whatever. But having those established boundaries that creates that consistency that they're talking about. If you cross it one time, there will be a penalty. If you cross it again, the stakes are higher. And I think that creates that consistency. That's what April and I try to do. We try to be really intentional about that so that our kids know when they're operating within those parameters, anything goes. When they cross them, it's, there's something that they're going to have to answer for it. And we also let them know that we set the boundaries. They don't. And we can move the boundary at any time we want to, according to what we see fit. And we always try to communicate with each other about that before one won't just jump in there and change everything. But if we see that this boundary is being pushed a little bit, we kind of come together on that and decide, is it something we can expand, give them a little more freedom on as they get older, because the boundaries do change, or is it something we need to rein them back in and bring the boundaries, closer? So that's kind of our role in discipline, or that's how April and I do it.
And I hear you all saying about consistency. There's a verse in Ephesians 6:4 that says, and it talks about fathers predominantly, and we're going to talk about fathers a little bit more in a few weeks when we talk about the daddy syndrome. But fathers, it says, do not exasperate. This is New International Version. Do not exasperate your children. I think a lot of us, as growing up in families, and we talked about everybody here is in a dysfunctional family. It started with Adam and Eve, the most dysfunctional family in the Bible. Right off the bat, we know that they're messed up, and it just continued on from there. But we need to make clear boundaries, because when kids get confused, and they often are, they don't know what the rules are, or and the boundaries are not because we're mad at them or we hate them. It's because we love them. Don't play in the road because we love you. We don't want that accident to happen. Don't touch this or do that. Those are things. Those are acts of love. The child won't see it at 2 or 3 years old. But what are you letting a 2 or 3 year old run in your life for anyway? What do they know? And yet, I have to be honest. I see a lot of parents whose children run their lives, and all you're doing is setting them up, in my opinion, for your grandchildren to have the same mess that you're going to have. And there's something important about sacrificing our lives, paying the price now, so that those who follow us down the road in generations to come will not have to fight that we've had. Some of you are first-generation Christians. This is the first time you've ever experienced some of this. So you're fighting battles that your children, who maybe have grown up in church, don't have to. But you still need to fight them. That's the act of love. The boundaries are what I'm talking about, and letting them know, not exasperating them by changing the rules all the time, or a different set of rules for them than for you. Being consistent and all that. Anybody else? You want to gravitate to the second question there, but what qualities do we think of what grows respect? Because I do see a disrespectful generation. I think it was Haley Smith was talking about how she wanted her children to say yes sir and no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. I love that. I mean, I think that really that just says respect not only to the hearer who's receiving it, which is so rare, but when the person who's giving it says that. Make eye contact was another thing that, I don't like it. I don't know. Look at me. Look me in the eye. Tell me what you believe. Because if you're looking down, you really don't believe it. And that's for children. They need to make that contact. They need to own their actions, in my opinion. And if they don't, then, we need to help them own their actions. What grows respect, or what character traits do you think as parents? I mean, you got a whole lot of grandparents and parents. You got some employers out there. You got certainly some coaches and others, Little League and what have you. What do we need to focus in on in this accidental intentionality? Elizabeth?
I think something big that I see throughout, Facebook, you can say that, or, just watching interactions, and something that I've purposefully tried not to, is I see parents try to be their kids' friends. And I love my kids, and, Hunter's at the age, he's 11, and so, yeah, we can laugh and have fun and, sing as loud as we can to a song on the radio, but I am his mom. And, I make it loud and clear to him, we're going to have a blast. And that's what Rex and I try to do, fun things, and kind of allow our kids to see that you can have fun and be a Christian. You don't have to go get drunk every weekend. That's, there are fun things to do. But we're your parents. And so there comes a time and a place to where, boom, when I mean business, I mean business. And so I think that's something that I've seen a lot, that, it's like, I don't want to tell them they can't go spend the night at these people's house that I really don't know what they're doing, because they'd be upset with me. Well, yeah, but do you want your kid watching the rated R movie or whatever? You gotta be the parent. You have to make the decisions. You have to look out what's best for them, and teach them the way that you want them to be taught. And so I think being the parent and showing them, have fun with your kids, do crazy things, let them see you dancing around to a song, being goofy or whatever, have fun with them, but yet be the parent. There's a fine line.
It's a tough line, yeah.
Kind of a little bit what Elizabeth was saying about having fun and stuff. I think a lot of times respect, starts from the very early age. And, one of the things that I remember growing up is that, we would have, like, on Friday nights, we would have, like a family night where, we watched Dukes of Hazzard, and the boys built these bar stools with a broom over it, and they would dive over them and stuff. I mean, we had like family nights like that where we all had fun together. we knew that our parents loved us and wanted to spend time with us. And you know, Dad, I'm pretty sure we have a picture like with you, with all 5 of us on your back, and you were, you know, playing horsey or whatever it was, where you throw us off your, you know, bounced around and throw us off your back. Now what you do with the grandkids. But just that, you know, knowing that from a very young age that, you know, the whole, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but like, you know, that they wrestle around, they play, you know, their Dad, you know, wasn't afraid to wrestle around on the floor and play with us and stuff like that. And so you knew that they cared. It wasn't just that, you know, Dad was going to work all the time so he could pay the bills and get groceries and stuff like that. I mean, we had fun together too. And then as you grow up, you know, that just kind of develops more, and you have that respect. You know that, you know, that he's just not the, you know, I mean, he is the leader of the house, but not just the, you know, authoritative, whatever. But, you know, we had fun together too, and I think that kind of built the foundation for respect as we got older. So,
one of the things off of what you said, Aaron, touch is vitally important. You look at the New Testament, Jesus touched a lot of people. The leper who came up to him, and you know, society said you can't touch him. You know, Jesus healed him, but what he did was profound. He went and hugged the guy. That was unheard of. I mean, he stunk. His skin was diseased. And yet that affection, that compassion that Jesus had, I think that really translates into our children. There's a thing in psychology called rough and tumble play. And it's where, you know, we get down on the floor. Again, we do it with grandkids now. I want them to feel how strong I am compared to them. Now, I couldn't do it with Brian or even the girls right now because they could all whip me. But and that really changed about 6th grade, 7th grade with Brian and Nathan in our family. I mean, they were stronger. They were lifting weights, you know. And it was not that Dad had the superpower over them at any point, but the touch affirms that you're part of me, and I'm not afraid to touch you. And I know some of us, you know, Bob was teaching about how to say prayer. And modeled that, and Mike and Nikki Andrews did a wonderful job. But I think we also need to model how to say I love you. And I'm not real good at that. This is the way I say I love you most of the time. But I think there's a way that we've got to, whatever works for you and your situation, and it's never too late. I don't care if you're a grandparent, your children are 40 years old, it doesn't matter. They need your approval. What's the first thing you're going to hear when you walk across heaven's stage? Well done. That's what every one of us here lives for. It's what we want. It's what we desire. When Daddy, Father, Abba, God says, well done, son. Well done, daughter. And I don't know if he's going to hug us or what's going to happen, but it isn't going to matter at that point because we have just received the accolation, the affirmation that we've all been waiting for. Why wait till we're dead or why wait till heaven? You know, we can do that now with people all around us, and it changes their lives when you embrace them. And I'm looking at little children right now out here in the sanctuary. You know, you hug on them when they're little. Don't stop. You know, I mean, and let them know that you're in charge. You're stronger. You're bigger. But that you're gentle, and that attention, that affection is positive in nature. Yes, there may be some negative. By the way, I like to use the paddle rather than the hand because that way they associate the punishment with an object and not with you. But whatever works for you, that's fine. There is some negative affirmation sometimes, but it ought to be balanced with the positive, and that's, I think, vitally important for any child. It's good. It's important in youth group here. It's important in a lot of the things we do. Some young people never get affirmed in a way that they understand and embrace, and that's just vitally important for all of us, no matter how old we are. I'm done now. Y'all got something? Anything else under character traits that, any stories you want to tell that you could on church on Sunday morning when it's being recorded and sent out over YouTube nationwide? Just to remind you.
I'll say something April and I have really focused on lately with our kids. And again, it's about being intentional, because if you wait for the time to be right, it'll never happen. You have to make things happen, and you have to set it up so that you can make it happen. And that takes planning, and I'm not much of a planner, but we spend time establishing these ideas and planning, and then we reevaluate them and see what's worked and what hasn't. But I think as far as qualities that grow respect in us, something that we've tried to instill in our kids, and mostly just here lately, is to add value to people. And when you add value to someone, I mean, it could be anything from giving them a compliment or praising them on something, or just a pat on the back. It doesn't have to be a word even. But when you add value to someone, you gain their respect back. Everything, so much today is based on the negative. If a kid comes home and they've got 5 A's and 1 B on the report card, the first thing we go to is the B. And we say, what happened? Why'd you get the B? And we overlook the other, the A's. And, it teaches them to always look at the negative too. And I think if you look for the positive in someone and mention it to them, whether through a word or just a pat on the back or something, you earn that person's respect. And I think we talked in Sunday school this morning. I always see those United States Marine Corps semi-trailers that says respect earned, never given. And I think you do have to earn respect. I think you should treat everyone with respect, but at the same time, I think you have to earn that, unlike salvation, which is given and never earned, where you can't do enough to earn it. We try to teach our kids to respect people and then expect respect. I don't know if I said that right. In return, respect them and expect the respect back. And again, we're intentional, and we're trying to get more intentional about teaching them how to be respectful and how to earn their respect. And one of the biggest things that I see, I have very little respect for someone who doesn't live up to what they claim to, or hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is the word I'm looking for. I can't come to church on Sunday and then and do the church thing, and then Monday through Saturday go out and live like I want to in front of my kids or in front of anybody else and expect them to have much respect for me, because it's hard for me to respect someone like that. And I think that living day to day is how you earn your kids' respect. They see you live it. They've watched you. And I'll shut up here in just a second. Something I heard recently was wrong actions won't bury you, but a wrong reaction will. And I think it's how we react when we do mess up that really earns our respect, because everybody messes up. How we respond to our own mistakes is what makes or breaks us. So that's something we focus on too. When we mess up, we admit it. We don't try to hide it, and we apologize to whoever we might have offended or whatever during the mess up. But I think the reaction is way more important than the initial action.
Any last comments? Anybody? Next Sunday, just to play off of this or segue into it, next Sunday we are going to do the interactive, which means you can bring your cell phone, your text, you can text us. We'll be right up here. It's going to go to a computer that's up here. And we're not trying to be tech tricky or anything like that, but sometimes people would like to ask a question. How would you handle this situation? What would you do? What if this were to happen? What do you think about this? And yet they want to remain anonymous. So we're just going to do a little of that. We're going to try it. We've never done it that way before, but we're going to try it next Sunday. So if there's something that maybe these 4 young people have raised, or maybe something that's on your heart, you can come back next week. You can certainly use the back of the bulletin too. But anyway, we're just going to deal with, we won't have time, but about 6 or 7 or 8 of them. But you're going to get some corporate wisdom from people who've made a lot of mistakes, but those are the people you want to talk to. Because if somebody's made a mistake, like Brian was saying, I'd rather talk to them. How did you handle it when you messed up, instead of those who think they're perfect and got it all together, because I can't relate to those folks. How about you? So anyway, if nothing else, how about a round of applause, and we'll let them go on down. Thank you very much, guys.